The fault in the circuit. The grav truck skimmed across the dried lake bed, weaving between rust-choked hulls of long-dead pleasure craft, their skeletal remains half buried in the cracked sediment. Brother Godric sat at the controls, one mechadendrite raised in signal. The truck banked hard around the leaning wreck of a bulk transport, once a proud vessel, now collapsed on its side, a gaping hole in its hull testament to some forgotten explosion. The reason for its demise was long lost, another unexplained mystery from the earliest days of the colony. To some aboard the Mechanicus truck, it might have occurred, briefly, that they were moving through archaeology. In the distance, the outline of modular Fote could be seen against the twilight, but it wasn't their destination. The truck slowed as it passed a shallow ridge that cradled an overturned yacht. Only a rusted ribcage remained. The inverted vessel now more like a shrine than a ship. Then the vehicle picked up speed again, headed toward the scattered, flickering lumens of Modular Bill on the far side of the lakebed. The green light of NihtWyrtha, swirling above like a jade marble, cast a strange hue over everything. The grav truck's hum began to fade. Moments after it vanished from view, a figure darted across its wake. Tall, long-legged, with backward-jointed limbs and a sweeping claw that carved through the dust behind it, it raced after the retreating vehicle. Then came another, then a dozen, dozens more. The NihtWyrtha, squealing with the joy of the hunt, surged forward into the night. The dust swirled and settled in the thin air once again. Near the old ridge, buried low in the mud-choked remains of the yacht, the barrel of a Serpent rifle shifted. The ripple of motion passed unnoticed by the demons. A cloaked figure knelt, then rose. Scion Scout Colin 3 brought his rifle to his shoulder and scanned the now empty horizon. Bornwolf stood next, drawing his Sildathnol in one hand, the Seeks in the other. The blade glowed only faintly, indicating that while daemons were nearby, none were yet upon them. Sinwolf stood to his full height, Serpenta hanging loose in his grip. He reached down and tapped Osbjorn, who was crouched low behind a corroded girder. The young pilot still held his sidearm, and in his other hand the glowing curved daemon horn that had saved his life. From above, Cuthhelm called down, lounging atop a twisted spar. "You know, if you're keeping that thing, you ought to give it a name." Osbjorn looked down at the horn. He hadn't asked for it, hadn't meant to create it, but he was glad it was there. Still, a name? Bjornwolf tapped him on the pauldron, voice brisk. "We can name things later. Let's move." Cole was already in motion, stalking across the lakebed toward the looming silhouette of Modular Bill. Bjornwolf followed in silence. Osbjorn and Cuthhelm took up position behind him. "Greenhorn," Cuthhelm suggested helpfully, nodding to the weapon. "Too obvious," muttered Sinwolf as he brought up the rear. "The relic of Nithelm?" Cuthhelm tried again. "Derivative," Sinwolf replied, deadpan. Bjornwolf ignored the banter. He walked on, blade in hand, every step steady and sure. The 5 men passed in silence through a graveyard of rust and memory. Twisted girders, sunken hulls, skeletal remains of the first ships to sail this long dry sea. 20,000 years of human history, reduced to dust and iron bones beneath the pale green glow of a world above. They passed like ghosts into the night. Modular Bill. The grav truck skimmed silently over the cracked lakebed, its hull throwing long shadows as the pale sun of Nithelm rose on the distant horizon. The rising light cast an eerie green hue across the desolate landscape, reflected from the great orb of NihtWyrtha looming in the sky above, its emerald oceans swirling in silence. Ahead, Modular Bill came into view. A cluster of blocky red structures rose from the flat ground like rusted teeth. Once a proud Mechanicus bastion, its purpose was evident in the vertical exhaust stacks, vox towers, and thick arterial conduits that ran like veins across its walls. Now it looked diseased. Windows were slick with oil-like blood, some cracked and blackened from interior fires. Lumen strips flickered weakly, casting strobe-like pulses across the dust-streaked landing pad. Brother Godric slowed the truck. The vehicle hovered just inches above the lakebed and drifted in under the shadow of a crumbling support gantry, its rusted lattice groaning with each thermal contraction. Ducts vented warm gas from beneath the surface, forming little clouds that writhed in the low gravity. "Welcome to Bill," Bjornwolf said grimly. The truck came to a halt beside a debris-strewn loading platform. The boarding ramp hissed open. The strike team disembarked quickly. tactical precision, weapons ready. Osric led the way with his Sildathnadel at the ready, followed closely by Beorthilm, Voratrix, and the Wigathine veterans. Grimhelm took rear guard, the belt of his heavy stubber slung over one arm, its barrel already swinging to cover movement. They passed shattered barricades and the remains of a skirmish, shell casings, scorched ground, and the stench of burned flesh. Lasburns scorched the walls. Many bodies lay where they had fallen, Skitari, servitors, a few engine-seers. But in some places only the blood remained, pooling in odd shapes or trailing down halls with no source in sight. "The lower levels are lost," Voratrix said, her tone analytical. "Our objective lies above. Terraforming control is on command level Theta." They moved as one, navigating the tight corridors of the facility, each hallway red-lit and flickering, shadows long and uncertain. As they climbed the stairwells, they encountered more signs of a fierce last stand: makeshift choke points, overturned machine racks, and las cutters sealed into bulkhead locks. But no survivors. They reached the command level. The large cogitator banks were dark, backup power humming but insufficient. As they stepped into the main chamber, the doors behind them slammed shut. "Movement," Osric warned. A terrible sound echoed through the chamber, metal groaning, joints clattering, followed by the whine of servos. From the walls and out of alcoves, shapes moved. Reanimated Mechanicus personnel staggered into the lumen glow. Their bodies had fused with the remnants of Niteatan infection, some with crystal-infused augmetics, others with warped limbs of molten red silicate. Their faces were still partially human, skin stretched over shifting muscle and corruption, clawed limbs replaced arms, tubes dripped with glowing pus. They were twisted echoes of what had once been minds of logic and order. "Contact! Multiple!" Grimhelm barked, bringing his heavy stubber to bear. The roar of the gun echoed through the chamber, rounds tearing into the abominations with explosive force, but not all went down. Bolter fire opened up, Osric and Nathaniel blasting controlled bursts into the lead targets. Brother Godric swept his fire across the right flank, suppressing a group trying to breach their rear. Voratrix moved like a blur, 2 bolters firing in tandem, her 4 combat mechadendrites spinning into motion, blades flashing as they tore apart a lunging hybrid at close quarters. "Hold formation," Beorthilm ordered, blasting one of the creatures with his Serpenta, the plasma bursting through its chest. "Don't let 'em close." But they already had. One of the things lunged at Serd, grappling his torso with a clawed augmetic. Hlafric and Berthelm lunged forward together, Serpenta rifles flaring, riddling the foe with burning shots until it collapsed into dust and oil. Outside, the shriek of the Nitatan pierced the rising wind as the windows shuddered, seals opening. The exterior walls trembled. The windows near the far bulkhead cracked. "They're coming in from outside," Osric growled. "Damn them!" Beorthilm turned to Grimhelm. "Hold the corridor. Don't let them flank us." Grimhelm smiled grimly, shifting his stance and unleashing another burst of fire. "Come on then, Grendelkin." The dull green glow from NihtWyrtha had faded behind the horizon. In its place, the first filtered light of the rising sun cracked through the scorched sky, casting a reddish hue across the walls of the modular colony. The red steel of Modular Bill shimmered in a way that made it look like it bled. In some ways, it was. The team had barely secured the command level. The door had slammed shut behind them, Brother Godric's mechadendrites locking the frame with a reinforced weld line. The smell of spent promethium and scorched oil hung in the air even through the team's breathers. Bodies lay all around, Mechanicus adepts, Skitari, and even a few refugees from Modular Fote. Some were clearly dead, torn apart by claws or burst from the inside. Others were gone. Pools of blood remained where bodies should have been, drag marks leading away, up walls, into ducts. Brother Nathaniel was already setting up an improvised Medicae station in the corner just in case. The others had fanned out in a defensive arc around the command dais. "They're all around us," said Beorthilm, peering through a cracked viewing slit. "We appear to be surrounded." He gave a short laugh as if enjoying the prospect. "They'll come from below," Osric replied, checking the rounds in his bolt pistol. "But they'll come from above, too. These things." He paused, glancing at the twisted corpses they'd just put down. "They're not too clever, just animals looking for the easy way in." From the shadows at the far end of the room, a mechanical hiss drew attention. Archmagos Voratrix stepped forward, her twin bolters in her forward arms, two of her rear limbs wielding gleaming monomolecular blades. Her hair, rust-red and braided in tight cords, swung like iron chains behind her. "This is my forge, my station," she said, voice crackling with vox modulation. "I'm quite done running." Suddenly the lights flickered. A thud hit the roof, then another. Then, "Roof!" yelled Sir Herd. The roof above the northern arch collapsed inward, spraying metal and dust as three Nihtwyrtha dropped through the hole, their forms flickering between half-seen demonic silhouettes and flesh-warped Mechanicus adepts. Their movements were wrong, erratic and jerking like broken dolls on strings. Voratrix narrowed her eyes, her ocular lenses adjusting with a soft mechanical hum. Something in their gait, too coordinated, too deliberate, stirred a calculation long forgotten in her data vaults. These weren't the spasmodic lunges of autonomous infection. These were patterned, synchronized. They moved as if from a single algorithm. All of them were Mechanicus once, half machine at minimum, most likely more. And she had known Magos de NihtWyrtha for centuries. He had always shown an unhealthy predilection for command protocols beyond standard rubric, a tendency to reassign autonomy subroutines from his personnel, be they Skitarii, tech thralls, or even senior adepts, to centralize control nexi. Laudable to some, distasteful to her. But as she watched the NihtWyrtha thralls move, the cog clicked into place. These were not individually possessed constructs. They were operating under a collective directive, a unified data thread, a hive logic. Her expression darkened. "They are operating via hyper-relay," she declared, her voice edged with both awe and disgust. Osric turned slightly, his bolter raised. "So who's issuing the commands?" Voratrix's mechadendrites flexed. A faint smirk tugged at her lips, mechanical and mirthless. "Magos de NihtWyrtha," she said. "He's still active in the new spheric substrata, somewhere in this facility, and he's turned the entire base into a distributed machine spirit infestation." Grimhelm made a grunt. "Good for him, but how does that help us?" he shouted back, open fire. His heavy stubber barked in brutal rhythm, heavy slugs tearing into one of the creatures and smashing it backward. Its shell cracked, but did not fall. Another lunged at him, but Sir Herd stepped forward, unloading his Serpenta at point-blank range into its midsection, molten plasma melting through silicate flesh. The Neverborn within boiled back into the immaterium, screaming. Voratrix stepped back from the shattered remains of one of the infected, her twin bolters smoking, auger lenses whirring as she studied the writhing remnants. "Cease targeting center mass," she ordered sharply, raising her voice over the thunder of gunfire. "Body trauma is inefficient. They're long past caring for pain." Osric slammed another magazine home. "Then what will stop them?" Nathaniel stepped forward, his tone clinical despite the chaos. "They're tethered through the new spheric relay," he explained, his augmetic hand twisting a servitor's ruined cranial implant for emphasis. "They're not acting autonomously. They're puppets, networked through residual augmetic linkage. Damage the relay interface, and the signal collapses." Bjorthelm barked back. "Where's the interface?" Nathaniel pointed with his bolt pistol. "Just behind the left shoulder. Nerve cluster adjacent to the spine joint. Feeds directly into the cortical socket of their visual augmetic. It's a secondary intake node." Voratrix nodded. "Danuit favored lateral monooptic relays. Hit the side opposite their augmetic eye. It severs uplink to the controlling signal." She fired again, this time aiming for the precise junction. The creature jerked, spasmed, and collapsed in silence, its movements permanently stilled. "See," she said, calmly reloading. "Precision over fury," Grimhelm growled. "They should have led with that." Osric snorted. "They're Mechanicus. They don't do simple." Nathaniel glanced up, tone flat. "Just shoot where we told you." Bjorthelm stepped into the breach, the dim lumen glow catching the red of his storm-worn armor, his Serpenta rifle gripped tight. Beyond the hatch, the corridor writhed with motion. Servitors with slack jaws and Skitarii with shattered protocol routines, each twisted and reanimated, charging forward with mechanical precision and daemon-driven intent. He raised his weapon. "Fake word," he roared, his death oath, his war cry. Each shot found its mark. He aimed not for the chest or limbs, but just behind the left shoulder, side of the augmetic eye as instructed. In rapid succession, corrupted adepts crumpled mid-charge, their bodies spasming and then falling with finality. Sparks burst from neck junctions as the nerve clusters were ruptured, neural bridges torn apart. The hallway filled with a chorus of collapsing machinery and the hiss of venting pneumatics. Clip empty, Bjorthelm calmly ejected the spent cell and reached for another, stepping over a mangled servitor. Osric moved in beside him, pausing only to plant a gauntleted hand on his shoulder with a resounding clang. "You want to join the Astartes?" he asked with a grin behind his helm. Wolfgar's always looking for candidates. Bjorthelm gave a lopsided smirk as he snapped the fresh cell into place. "Tell him I've already got the hairline for it." Osric chuckled and stepped forward again, chainsword whirring to life as more shadows came down the hall. "Then let's see if you've got the temperament." Bjorthelm and Hlafric braced on either side of the entrance, laying down withering crossfire while Osric uncovered the breach. His Sildathnadla burned blue in his hand, cutting through unnatural flesh as if slicing through wax. From the far hatch came two more twisted shapes, former Skitaria, flesh hardening into warped shells, green ichor dripping from their eyes and mouths. Their voices moaned binary prayer, still trying to recite the litany of preservation through mouths no longer their own. Voratrix stepped forward, expression one of anger. Her bolters barked in perfect sync, rounds detonating inside one creature's chest, shattering it into wet fragments. She danced through them, blades flashing, servo limbs guiding each strike with precise fury. "For the Omnissiah, if he cares to listen," she whispered, her voice the only calm thing in the storm. She grabbed a mutated tech priest, ripping away his mono-optic relay. She spoke into it. "Magos Denuit, how far you have fallen, but you were never that good anyway. That's why I put you on this rock," she snarled, ripping the cord out and tossing it into a pile of detritus. Nathaniel stepped beside her, firing his bolt pistol into the last of the crawling horrors on the north side before rushing to stabilize Hlafric, who had taken a glancing blow from one of the reanimated. The breach was holding, for now. Voratrix addressed them. "Stand by. I have an idea we are about to have bigger company." With a shriek of tortured metal, the reinforced bulkhead exploded inward, a shockwave of sparks and shrapnel announcing the arrival of Magos Denuit, or what was once Danuit. He stood impossibly tall, surrounded by hissing clouds of static discharge. His once scarlet robes were blackened and cracked with warped taint, curling around a torso of spined augmetics and swollen flesh. Dozens of mechadendrites writhed behind him like snakes. Eyes, some mechanical, some unnatural, glared from every angle. As he stepped forward, refractor fields shimmered around him, warping incoming fire into harmless arcs of light. Bolt rounds ricocheted uselessly from his frame. Osric raised the Sildathnidal and fired. A flash of cerulean light lanced from the weapon, punching through one of Denuit's servo arms. The appendage shriveled instantly, its flesh boiled, augmetics collapsed like glass. But the monster only roared, charging forward with inhuman speed. One massive clawed limb smashed Osric aside. The Astartes crashed into the deck with a thunderous clang, his Sildathnidal tumbling from his grip, sliding across the metal floor, still glowing but with a thin crack in the crystal. The others fired, but it was futile. Heat shimmered around Danuit's form as if reality itself resisted him. Plasma bursts and mass-reactive rounds slammed into his field, only to dissipate like light striking water. Archmagos Voratrix rose, her full height unfurled like some terrible steel spider, a shape of precision and menace. 8 mechadendrites extended, blades whirred, and twin-bolt pistols snapped forward in her grasp. She advanced without fear, engaging Denuit in a blur of brutalist martial combat. Augmetic claws struck augmetic blades. Servo limbs clashed with surgical fury. Refractor fields screamed against each other like wailing ghosts. Sparks rained down as ancient tech clashed in a battle that shook the upper command deck. But Denuit was no longer merely mechanicus. Warp-touched, his limbs extended beyond what should be possible. His voice echoed in multiple layers, some machine, some demonic. One blow caught Voratrix across her thorax, sending her crashing into a cogitator bank. Sparks burst, fluids hissed. Her hood was torn, revealing the cracked but still functioning plating beneath. She lay still, broken, or so it seemed. Denuit stood above her, arms spread in triumph. Godric charged him, but he flicked the space marine away like a fly. "I am the Archmagos of Fiskbala now," he declared, broadcasting his voice across every channel, reaching for command protocols across the system. "Obey me, children of Mars." Voratrix's eyes fluttered open. Her mouth twitched into a smirk. "You are late, but well played," she hissed. Danuit froze. His data spines reached out, seeking her command links, only to find nothing. She had already severed them. His control code fed back into a loop. No compliance, no obedience. Only silence. What have you done?" he stammered. His mind reached into hers. And stopped. He looked into her mind via the noosphere link. Something ancient stared back. His voice cracked with panic as he staggered back as if struck by a physical force. You don't know what she is," he howled at the others. "She isn't. She's not. But before he could finish, Osric surged up from the side, one gauntlet glowing with crackling energy as he reclaimed the fallen, cracked Sildathnidal. "Feg a word," he bellowed. He drove the crystalline blade straight into Danuit's chest. The weapon flashed bright blue, the crystalline structure of the relic weapon splintered. Osric then fired his bolt pistol point blank into the impact point. The Sildathnidal shattered, piercing the Magos' form from within. Light, cold, real, and unforgiving, blasted outward in a starburst of unmaking, the blast wave spreading outwards for hundreds of yards. Outside, the scraping of rending claws stopped, replaced by the soft thuds of the silicate husks of the Netaetan, now empty of their demonic hosts, fell down the side of the building. Empty husks tumbling in slow arcs through the weak gravity, crumbling into silicate and ash. Danuit spasmed violently. The demonic powers bound to him screamed as they were torn apart. His limbs collapsed. The warp-touched armor fractured. With one last convulsion, he slammed to the deck in ruin. The relay broke. Across Modular Bill, the corrupted servitors and Skitari dropped as if strings had been cut. Silence fell. Voratrix exhaled slowly, then stood. "Of course," she said, looking down at her former Magos still steaming. "I am the Archmagos of Fiskbala." Osric got to his feet beside her, the smoke still curling from his fractured armor. He flexed the stump of his arm, now sparking faintly, and waved it toward the smoldering corpse of Magos Danuit. "You really need to be more careful who you assign to your stations, Archmagos," he said dryly. Voratrix turned to him, brushing aside ash from her shoulder with an elegant, servo-assisted motion. She smiled faintly, though there was a strange sadness in it. "He was a filing clerk," she said, her voice even. "A good one. Don't blame him for what the ruinous powers choose to corrupt. The fault was in the circuit." She did not elaborate, nor did she need to. Brother Nathaniel crouched nearby, busy applying sealant to Godric's ruined leg, which jutted at an unnatural angle. Godric winced but held his silence. Nathaniel glanced up at Voratrix with a flicker of suspicion, just a glint in his eyes, but said nothing, returning to his work with clinical precision. Grimhelm stood at the edge of the broken command room, staring out the shattered viewport. Below, the Netaetan lay still across the moon's surface, their once feral movements gone, husks empty in the green-tinted light. He turned his head, jerking a thumb at the Magos' remains. "You lost your magic pistol," he said. Osric nodded, glancing at the remains of the Sildathnidal, the blue-streaked shard fused into the ruin of Danuit's chest. "Seemed like a good idea at the time," he said with a shrug. He looked at his stump again. "That was my 6th hand. I suppose I should try better armor for the 7th. Voratrix stepped closer, taking his ruined forearm in one of her elegant manipulator limbs, examining it with interest. "The Sildathnidal is more than a weapon," she said. "It's a tethered disruptor, a relic designed to sever any link to the immaterium and real space. Shattering its core released a psionic shockwave, enough to tear the demons loose from their hosts. It was a sacrifice," she added, "but a necessary one." Nathaniel looked at her again. This time he held her gaze for a heartbeat longer. Then he gave a single stiff nod and returned to stabilizing Godric, his brows drawn. Voratrix turned from them, her mechanical limbs clicking as she stepped through the warped threshold of the chamber. "We still need to reach terraforming control," she said, voice clipped and resolute. She paused, glancing back, her silhouette framed in the wreckage. "Let's hope Bornwolf succeeded in his task. If he didn't," she gestured toward the collapsed wall, "we'll have more company soon. and were fresh out of relic pistols to blow up. She disappeared down the corridor. The others walked, limped, and hopped after her. Then Grimhelm at the rear sighed, hefting his heavy stubber. "Then can we go home?" he inquired, jogging to catch up. Many miles away, oblivious to the battle just won in Modular Bill, 5 figures walked into the pale dawn light, their long shadows stretching across the rust-stained bed of the dead lake. Ahead, silhouetted in the green-tinged sunrise, stood the outer spires and gantries of Modular Fort, silent, skeletal, waiting. Dust clung to their boots and cloaks, and behind them, nothing stirred but the fading wind.